The stagecoach arrived in San Jose, California, on a Tuesday afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman so frail she could barely sit upright on the worn leather seat. And by the time the driver pulled the horses to a stop outside the doctor's office, she had collapsed entirely against the sidewall, her breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Marcus Hayes was a man of 50 years who had seen his share of illness in the growing town. But when they carried the young woman into his examination room, he felt his stomach tighten with concern. Her skin was pale as fresh milk, her lips tinged with blue, and her body burned with fever. The stagecoach driver explained that she had boarded in Sacramento 3 days prior, already looking unwell, but insisting she needed to reach San Jose where her uncle supposedly lived. No one had been able to locate any uncle, and now here she lay, barely conscious, with no one to claim her. Dr. Hayes worked through the afternoon, doing everything his medical knowledge allowed. He applied cool compresses, administered what medicines he had, and monitored her vital signs with growing alarm. By evening, when the local rancher Quentin Kane stopped by to have a cut on his hand examined, the doctor was shaking his head with resignation. Quentin was a tall man of 26 years, broad-shouldered and strong from years of working his family's cattle ranch just outside town. He had sun-weathered skin, dark brown hair that touched his collar, and gray eyes that seemed to notice everything. He stood in the doorway of the examination room, watching as Dr. Hayes checked the young woman's pulse yet again. "Who is she?" Quentin asked, his voice low and respectful of the gravity in the room. "No one knows. Came in on the stage from Sacramento. She has been asking for an uncle, but no one by the name she mentions lives here. I have searched the records myself." Dr. Hayes straightened up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "She has pneumonia, Quentin. Her lungs are filled with fluid and her body is exhausted. The journey here probably made everything worse." "Will she recover?" The doctor was silent for a long moment. "I do not believe so. She is too weak. Her body has been fighting this illness for too long, and she has nothing left to give. I would be surprised if she makes it through the night." Quentin stepped closer, looking down at the woman. Even in her illness, he could see she was young, probably no more than 22 or 23 years old. She had auburn hair that lay damp against her forehead, and her face, though drawn with sickness, had a delicate beauty to it. Something in his chest tightened as he watched her struggle for each breath. "What will happen to her?" he asked. "If she dies tonight, the church will bury her. If she somehow lives longer, I will have to move her to the boarding house. I need this room for other patients, and I cannot afford to keep her here indefinitely without payment." Quentin made a decision that surprised even himself. "I will take her." Dr. Hayes turned to stare at him. "What?" "I will take her to my ranch. I will care for her there." "Quentin, she is dying. There is nothing more to be done for her. You would be taking on the burden of a stranger's death. Then I will bury her properly on my land, and she will not die alone among strangers." Quentin met the doctor's eyes steadily. "But maybe she will not die. Maybe with rest and care, she will fight through this. Quentin, I am telling you as a medical professional, she is too weak. Her body cannot sustain this fight much longer. Then let her spend whatever time she has left somewhere peaceful, not in a crowded boarding house or a doctor's office. My mother died in a cold hospital back east before we came here. I swore then I would never let someone die without dignity if I could help it." Dr. Hayes studied the younger man's face, seeing the determination there. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But you must continue the treatment I have started. Cool compresses for the fever, keep her hydrated if she wakes enough to drink, and these medicines must be given 3 times a day." He began writing out instructions on a piece of paper. "I will do everything you say." I will come by your ranch tomorrow to check on her, though I expect I will be coming to pronounce her death rather than treat her recovery." Quentin said nothing to that. He simply removed his hat and waited while Dr. Hayes prepared the young woman for transport. They wrapped her in blankets, and Quentin lifted her carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he felt anger rise in him at whatever circumstances had brought her to this state. No one should be this alone in the world, this close to death with no one to care. He carried her out to his wagon, settling her gently in the back on a bed of hay he covered with his own coat. The evening air was cool, and he wanted to make sure she stayed warm. Dr. Hayes handed him a bag of medicines and supplies, along with the written instructions. "God be with you, Quentin," the doctor said quietly. "And with her," Quentin replied, climbing up onto the wagon seat. The ride back to his ranch took nearly an hour in the fading light. The Kane Ranch sat on 300 acres of good grazing land, with a main house that Quentin's father had built 20 years earlier, when they first settled in California. His parents were both gone now, his father dead 5 years from a heart ailment, his mother having passed back east before they moved west. Quentin ran the ranch with the help of 3 hired hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and a housekeeper named Mrs. Chen, who came 3 times a week to help with cooking and cleaning. He pulled the wagon up to the main house and carefully lifted the young woman again. She stirred slightly in his arms, murmuring something incoherent, but did not wake. He carried her inside and up the stairs to the guest bedroom that had once been his mother's sewing room. It had a large window that faced east, catching the morning sun, and a comfortable bed with a thick mattress. Quentin laid her down gently and began removing her boots and the outer layers of her dusty, travel-worn clothing, trying to make her more comfortable while maintaining her modesty. Underneath, she wore a simple cotton nightdress that was damp with sweat from her fever. He covered her with clean sheets and a light quilt, then went to fetch water and cloths for the compresses Dr. Hayes had instructed him to use. For the next several hours, he sat beside her bed, changing the cool compresses on her forehead and wrists, trying to bring down the raging fever. Her breathing was labored, and sometimes she coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made him wince. He followed the doctor's instructions precisely, measuring out the medicine and managing to get a little bit down her throat when she was semi-conscious enough to swallow. Somewhere past midnight, her fever seemed to spike even higher. She began thrashing in the bed, crying out words he could not understand. He held her shoulders gently, trying to keep her from hurting herself, murmuring reassurances even though he did not think she could hear him. "Easy now, easy. You are safe here. Just rest. Let your body rest." But she continued to struggle, trapped in some fever dream, her face contorted with distress. Quentin made a decision and went to fetch more cold water from the well outside. He soaked several cloths and placed them on her forehead, her neck, her wrists, anywhere he could think to help cool her burning skin. He opened the window to let in the cool night air, not caring about conventional wisdom that said night air was dangerous for the ill. Her fever was going to kill her if he could not bring it down. He stayed with her all through that long night, fighting for her life when she was too weak to fight for it herself. He changed compresses, administered medicine, and simply talked to her, telling her about the ranch, about the morning sunrises over the eastern hills, about the cattle and the horses, about anything he could think of to fill the silence and perhaps anchor her to this world. As dawn began to break, painting the sky outside the window in shades of pink and gold, he saw the first sign of change. Her thrashing had stopped, and her breathing, while still labored, seemed slightly easier. He touched her forehead with the back of his hand and felt his heart leap. The fever had broken. Her skin was still warm but no longer burning hot. He slumped back in his chair, exhausted but hopeful. She was not out of danger yet, not by a long measure, but she had survived the night. That was something Dr. Hayes had not expected. Quentin stood and stretched his stiff muscles, then headed downstairs to make coffee and something to eat. He would need to keep his strength up if he was going to continue caring for her. As he stood in the kitchen, measuring coffee into the pot, he heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Through the window, he saw Dr. Hayes climbing down, his medical bag in hand and a somber expression on his face. Quentin opened the door before the doctor could knock. "She is alive." Dr. Hayes blinked in surprise. Truly, her fever broke just before dawn. She is sleeping now, but it seems more natural, less like she is fighting for every breath. The doctor followed Quentin upstairs, and together they stood beside the bed. Dr. Hayes performed a thorough examination, listening to her lungs, checking her pulse, examining her eyes and skin. When he finished, he looked at Quentin with an expression of amazement. "I cannot explain this. By all rights, she should have died last night. Her body was too weak to sustain the fight. Whatever you did, Quentin, it worked. I only did what you told me to do. Perhaps." Or perhaps she sensed that someone was fighting for her, caring for her, and that gave her something to hold on to. The will to live is a powerful thing, and she had no reason to fight when she was alone. Now she does. Will she recover fully? Dr. Hayes was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "She has survived the worst, but she is not out of danger. Her lungs are still badly compromised. The pneumonia has not resolved, only retreated. She will need weeks, perhaps months, of careful nursing to truly recover. She must rest, eat properly, regain her strength slowly. Any setback could be fatal. I will care for her as long as it takes." "Why, Quentin? You do not know this woman. She might have no way to repay you. She might not even be a good person. Why would you take this on?" Quentin looked down at the sleeping woman, at the way the morning light touched her auburn hair, at the peaceful expression on her face now that the fever had released its grip. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live. Because she fought through last night, and that means she is a fighter. I will not give up on her when she refuses to give up on herself." Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "Very well. I will return tomorrow to check on her progress. In the meantime, continue what you are doing. Keep her cool but not cold. Give her water in small amounts when she wakes. Do not try to feed her solid food yet, but perhaps some broth if she can manage it. And Quentin, prepare yourself for the possibility that she still might not make it." "I understand." After the doctor left, Quentin returned to his chair beside the bed. He was exhausted from the sleepless night, but he did not want to leave her alone. Instead, he dozed in the chair, waking periodically to check on her and administer her medicines according to Dr. Hayes' schedule. It was mid-morning when he heard a soft sound from the bed. His eyes opened immediately, and he leaned forward to see her eyelids fluttering. Slowly, with obvious effort, she opened her eyes. They were blue, he noticed, a deep blue like the sky just before sunset. She stared up at the ceiling for a moment, clearly disoriented, then her gaze shifted to him. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and painful sounding. "You are safe. You are at my ranch outside San Jose. You were very ill. The doctor said you would not survive, but you did. You fought through it." She blinked slowly, trying to process this information. "Thirsty?" Quentin quickly poured water from the pitcher on the bedside table into a cup. He slid his arm under her shoulders, lifting her just enough to drink without choking. She managed a few small sips before her strength gave out and she fell back against the pillows, her eyes already closing again. "Rest now," he said softly. "You are safe here, just rest." She murmured something that might have been thanks, and then she was asleep again. But this time, Quentin could see the difference. This was true healing sleep, not the half-conscious state of fever dreams. He felt something warm spread through his chest, something that might have been hope or might have been something else entirely. He found himself wanting to know more about her, to understand what had brought her to San Jose alone and sick, to hear her story and learn her name. The days that followed established a routine. Quentin continued to care for her with the dedication of a devoted nurse. He gave her water and medicine, changed her bedclothes when they became damp with sweat, read to her from books in his small library when she seemed restless. She woke periodically, always disoriented at first, but each time she stayed awake a little longer. On the third day, she was awake long enough to have a real conversation. Quentin was sitting beside the bed, reading from a book of poetry his mother had loved when he heard her clear her throat softly. "You have been taking care of me," she said, her voice still weak but clearer than before. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you needed help." She studied his face with those deep blue eyes, searching for something. "The doctor, he told you I would not survive. He did. But you took me in anyway." "I did." "I do not understand. You do not know me. I could be anyone. I could be a terrible person." Quentin set the book aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes meeting hers. "The doctor said you were too weak, that your body could not sustain the fight any longer. But I looked at you, and I saw something he did not see. I saw someone who had been fighting for a long time, probably long before you got sick. You did not give up on that stagecoach, even when you could barely breathe. You did not give up that first night here when the fever nearly took you. You are a fighter. That is all I needed to know." Tears filled her eyes and spilled over, running down her temples into her hair. "I do not feel like a fighter. I feel broken. Being broken does not mean you cannot be strong. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who have been broken and put themselves back together." She closed her eyes, more tears leaking out. "I do not even know your name, Quentin Kane. This is my ranch and you are Hope Olson." She opened her eyes again. "I was trying to find my uncle, my mother's brother. She said he lived in San Jose, but I think maybe she was wrong, or maybe he left, or maybe she lied to me about it. I do not know any more." "What happened to your mother?" "She died 6 months ago, cholera. After she was gone, I had no one. I was living in a boarding house in Sacramento, working at a laundry, but I got sick and lost my position. I spent all my money on medicine that did not work, and I thought if I could just find my uncle, he would help me. So I bought a stagecoach ticket with the last of my savings and came here." She laughed, a bitter sound. "I was a fool. You were desperate. There is a difference. Now I am your burden." "You are not a burden, Hope." The way he said her name, soft and sure, made her heart do something strange in her chest. She found herself studying his face, really looking at him for the first time. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and kind eyes. There was a steadiness about him that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her mother died. "I have no way to repay you for your kindness," she said quietly. "I am not asking for repayment." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to get better. I want you to rest and heal and become strong again. That is all." She did not know what to say to that. In her experience, no one did anything without expecting something in return. But Quentin Kane seemed to be exactly what he appeared, a genuinely kind man who had helped her simply because she needed help. It was almost more than she could comprehend. Over the following weeks, Hope slowly improved. Quentin continued to care for her with patient dedication. Dr. Hayes visited regularly and expressed amazement at her progress, though he cautioned them both that she remained fragile and a relapse was always possible. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, was delighted to have another woman in the house and took over some of Hope's care, though Quentin remained her primary caretaker. As Hope grew stronger, She was able to stay awake for longer periods. Quentin would sit with her in the afternoons and they would talk. He told her about his life on the ranch, about his parents, and how they had come west seeking a better life, about the cattle business and his plans for expanding the herd. She told him about growing up in a small town in Missouri, about her mother who had been a seamstress, about the books she loved to read, and the dreams she had once had of becoming a teacher. "Why did you not pursue teaching?" Quentin asked one afternoon as they sat together, Hope now able to sit propped up with pillows. "My mother needed me. After my father died when I was 15, it was just the two of us. We moved to Sacramento hoping for better opportunities, but things were harder than we expected. I took the laundry job to help make ends meet. Teaching requires education, certification. We could not afford any of that. You could still pursue it now, once you are well." Hope looked at him with surprise. "I have nothing. No money, no prospects, no way to pay for the education I would need." "You could work here on the ranch. I could use help with the bookkeeping and correspondence. The pay would not be much at first, but it would be something. You could save. And there is a school in town that is always looking for teachers. Perhaps they would take you on as an assistant while you learn." "Why would you do that for me?" Quentin met her eyes and something passed between them, something electric and warm. "Because you deserve a chance at your dreams. Because you fought to stay alive, and now you should have something to live for beyond just survival." Hope felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever seen her as anything more than a burden or a worker. In Quentin's eyes, she saw possibility. She saw hope, just like her name. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." As the weeks turned into a month, then 2 months, Hope continued to grow stronger. She was able to leave the bed, first just to sit by the window, then to walk around the room, and finally to venture downstairs with Quentin's support. The world outside her sick room seemed almost unbearably bright and full of life. Quentin showed her the ranch, introducing her to his 3 ranch hands, Miguel, Thomas, and young Henry, who was barely 19. They all treated her with respect and kindness, clearly taking their cue from how Quentin treated her. He showed her the horses, and she fell in love with a gentle mare named Daisy who had a white star on her forehead. He showed her the vegetable garden that Mrs. Chen tended, and the chicken coop, and the barn where the cattle were sometimes brought in for medical treatment. He showed her the land itself, the rolling hills covered in grass, the distant mountains purple against the sky. "It is beautiful," she breathed, standing at the fence line and looking out over his property. "It is home," Quentin said, standing beside her. "And you are welcome here for as long as you wish to stay." She turned to look at him, and the afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, making it shine. Her heart was beating faster, and she realized with a start that she was falling in love with him. Perhaps she had been falling in love with him since that first conversation when she woke to find him caring for her. He was everything she had never dared to dream of: kind, strong, gentle, honorable. But surely he did not feel the same way. He was just being kind to someone who needed help. She was nothing special, just a sick woman he had taken pity on. Except the way he was looking at her now, with warmth in his gray eyes and something tender in his expression, made her wonder if maybe she was wrong about that. "Hope," he said softly. "Yes, I am glad you came to San Jose. Even though it brought you here sick and alone, I am glad, because it meant I found you." Her heart was pounding now. "Quentin, I do not understand." He reached out and gently took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with careful tenderness. "I think you do. I think you feel it too, this thing between us. I have felt it growing stronger every day since you opened your eyes and looked at me that first time." "I was afraid to hope," she whispered. "You have been so kind, but I thought it was just kindness, not this." It started as kindness. But Hope, somewhere along the way, I started to care for you in a different way. I started to look forward to every moment I could spend with you. I started to imagine a future where you were not just a guest in my home, but a part of my life. A permanent part. I am falling in love with you, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know I should not. I know you are just being kind, but I cannot help it. You saved my life, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Quentin smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face, making him look younger and incredibly handsome. Then we are matched, because I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been since that first night when you fought so hard to live. I held your hand through the worst of the fever, and I remember thinking that I wanted to keep holding your hand forever. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Hope felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. I do not want to rush you, Quentin continued. You are still recovering, and I know you need time to regain your strength and figure out what you want from life. But I wanted you to know how I feel. I wanted you to know that when I offered you a place here, it was not just as an employee or a guest. It was as someone I hope will choose to stay for very different reasons. I want to stay, Hope said, her voice trembling with emotion. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because here is where I want to be, with you. Quentin cupped her face in his hands, his thumb gently wiping away the tears on her cheeks. May I kiss you? Yes, she breathed. Please, yes. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. She wanted this more than she had wanted anything in a long time. When his lips touched hers, soft and gentle and reverent, she felt something inside her come alive. This was not just about gratitude or dependency. This was real. This was love. They stood there by the fence line, kissing in the afternoon sun, while the wind blew through the grass and the horses whinnied in their pasture. It was a perfect moment, and Hope felt the last pieces of her broken heart start to mend. The next few months were some of the happiest of Hope's life. She continued to grow stronger, her lungs healing more each day. Dr. Hayes was astounded by her recovery and declared it a medical miracle. Hope knew it was not a miracle, but rather the result of careful nursing, good food, rest, and most importantly, having something to live for. She began helping around the ranch in small ways at first. She took over the bookkeeping as Quentin had suggested, and she discovered she had a knack for numbers and organization. She helped Mrs. Chen with the cooking and learned to make bread and stews and pies. She spent time with the horses, especially Daisy, who became her constant companion when she went on short walks around the property. And she spent time with Quentin. They courted properly, with all the old-fashioned rituals. He took her into town for church services on Sundays, introducing her to the community as Miss Hope Olson, who was staying at his ranch. The gossips raised their eyebrows at first, but Mrs. Chen's presence as chaperone seemed to satisfy most of the concerns about propriety. Besides, anyone who saw the way Quentin and Hope looked at each other could see that their intentions were honorable and their feelings genuine. He took her on picnics in the hills, spreading a blanket under the oak trees and sharing sandwiches while they talked about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride properly, putting her on Daisy and leading them around the corral until she felt confident enough to go out on her own. He bought her books from the general store in town, learning her tastes and surprising her with new titles. He courted her with patience and devotion, never pushing her beyond what she was comfortable with, always respecting her boundaries, and Hope fell deeper in love with him every day. She loved the way he was gentle with the animals but strong when he needed to be. She loved the way he treated everyone with respect, from Mrs. Chen to the ranch hands to the shopkeepers in town. She loved his quiet strength and his kind heart. She loved the way he looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in his world. On a warm evening in September, 6 months after she had first arrived in San Jose more dead than alive, Quentin asked Hope to take a walk with him. They went to the fence line where he had first kissed her, and they stood watching the sun set over the western hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. "Hope," Quentin said, turning to face her and taking both her hands in his. "I have something to ask you, and I am nervous about it even though I think I know what your answer will be." Her heart started to race. "Quentin, these past 6 months have been the best of my life. When I took you from that doctor's office, I thought I was just helping a stranger. I had no idea I was bringing home the woman who would change everything. You have made this house feel like a home again. You have made every day brighter just by being in it. I cannot imagine my future without you." He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. When he opened it, Hope gasped. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful, with a small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "This was my mother's ring. My father gave it to her when they got engaged back before they came west. She wanted me to give it to the woman I would marry. Hope Olson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Hope was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling through them. "Yes. Yes, Quentin, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Hope felt her whole world shift into place. Everything she had been through, all the pain and loss and sickness, had led her to this moment, had led her to this man, and she would not change any of it because it had brought her home. They were married in October of 1878, in the small church in San Jose, with Dr. Hayes standing as Quentin's best man and Mrs. Chen as Hope's matron of honor. The ranch hands came, cleaned up in their Sunday best, and many of the townspeople who had come to know Hope attended as well. She wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the ranch. Quentin wore a new suit he had ordered from a catalog, and he looked so handsome that Hope's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. When the preacher asked if Quentin took Hope to be his lawfully wedded wife, he said, "I do," in a voice that rang with certainty and joy. When he asked Hope the same question, she said, "I do," with tears of happiness in her eyes. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other all the days of their lives, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin kissed her with such tenderness that there was not a dry eye in the church. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by Mrs. Chen with help from several women from town. There was music and dancing, and Hope danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling like the luckiest woman in the world. She thought about that desperate, sick woman who had arrived in San Jose 6 months ago, believing she was going to die alone. She thought about how Quentin had refused to accept the doctor's pronouncement, had fought for her when she was too weak to fight for herself. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked as they swayed together to the music. "I am thinking about how you told me I was a fighter, even when I did not believe it myself. You proved me right. We proved each other right. You fought for me, and I fought to live, and together we won." "Together," Quentin agreed, pulling her closer. "That is how it will always be from now on, together." The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and deep happiness. Hope settled into her role as Quentin's wife and partner. She took over management of the household completely, working alongside Mrs. Chen to keep things running smoothly. She also continued to manage the ranch's bookkeeping and found she enjoyed the challenge of tracking expenses and income, finding ways to make the ranch more profitable. She also began pursuing her dream of teaching. The school teacher in town, Miss Martha Roberts, was an older woman who welcomed Hope's offer to assist her. Hope spent 3 mornings a week at the school, helping the younger children with their reading and arithmetic. It was unpaid work, but it gave her valuable experience and fulfilled something in her soul. She loved seeing the children's faces light up when they mastered a new concept, loved being part of their education. Quentin supported her completely, never suggesting that her place was only at home. He saw how happy teaching made her and encouraged her to pursue more formal training. He set aside money each month for her to eventually attend a teacher's college if she wanted, though Hope was content for now with her informal apprenticeship. Their life together developed a comfortable rhythm. They woke early, working together to prepare breakfast. Quentin would head out to work with the cattle while Hope managed the household and went to the school. They would meet again at midday for lunch, talking about their mornings, sharing the small details of their days. Evenings were spent together, sometimes doing chores, sometimes just sitting on the porch and watching the sunset, always connected. In the privacy of their bedroom, their love deepened in ways that Hope had never imagined. Quentin was a tender and passionate lover, always attentive to her needs, always making sure she felt cherished. Hope blossomed under his attention, discovering parts of herself she had not known existed. Their physical intimacy was an extension of their emotional connection, and it bound them together even more tightly. As winter turned to spring and then summer, Hope began to notice changes in her body. Her monthly courses stopped, and she began feeling nauseous in the mornings. Mrs. Chen noticed before Hope even said anything, seeing the signs she had seen in many women before. "You are with child," Mrs. Chen said gently one morning when Hope had to rush outside to be sick. Hope looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But yes, I am quite sure." Hope put a hand on her still flat stomach, feeling a surge of joy so intense it almost hurt. She was going to have a baby, Quentin's baby. After everything she had been through, after being so close to death, she was now carrying new life inside her. When Quentin came in for lunch, Hope could barely contain herself. She waited until they were alone in the kitchen, and then she took his hands and placed them on her stomach. "Quentin, I have something to tell you." He looked at her face, seeing the happiness there, and his eyes widened. "Hope, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her, and then a huge smile broke across his face. He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around carefully before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. Hope, you have given me everything. You are my wife, my partner, my love, and now you are giving me a child. I am the luckiest man alive." Dr. Hayes confirmed the pregnancy and estimated the baby would arrive in late winter or early spring. He examined Hope carefully, concerned because of her history with illness, but pronounced her healthy and strong. "Whatever weakness you had when you arrived here, it is gone now," he told her. "You have made a remarkable recovery, Hope. This pregnancy should progress normally. Just take care of yourself, rest when you need to, and let me know if anything concerns you." The months of Hope's pregnancy were peaceful and happy. Quentin was attentive almost to the point of being overprotective, but Hope found his concern endearing rather than stifling. He helped her with tasks that became more difficult as her belly grew, and he talked to the baby every night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and promising to teach them to ride and care for the animals. Hope continued working at the school through the fall, though she stopped as winter approached and her pregnancy became more obvious. Miss Roberts hugged her warmly and told her she would always have a place at the school when she was ready to return. Hope appreciated that, though she knew it would be a while before she could think about anything beyond the baby. Christmas of 1879 was celebrated quietly at the ranch, just Hope and Quentin and Mrs. Chen. They exchanged small gifts and shared a special meal, and Quentin gave Hope a cradle he had spent weeks building in the barn, wanting to surprise her. It was beautiful, made of polished wood with intricate carvings of horses and stars. Hope cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness and the reality of what was coming. In February of 1880, on a cold but clear morning, Hope went into labor. Mrs. Chen sent Henry racing into town to fetch Dr. Hayes, while she stayed with Hope, helping her through the early contractions. Quentin was beside himself with worry, pacing the downstairs hall while Mrs. Chen stayed with Hope in their bedroom. "She will be fine, Mrs. Chen told him firmly when he tried to come upstairs for the 5th time. "This is natural. Let her do what she needs to do." But when Dr. Hayes arrived and examined Hope, his expression grew concerned. The baby was not positioned correctly, and Hope's labor was progressing slowly. As the hours wore on, both Hope and the baby began showing signs of distress. Hope was exhausted, her strength fading, and Dr. Hayes pulled Quentin aside. "This is going to be difficult," he said bluntly. "The baby needs to be turned, and Hope is weakening. I am going to do everything I can, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that we might lose them both." Quentin felt his blood run cold. "No, do whatever you have to do, but save them, both of them." "I will try, but Quentin, some things are beyond my control." "Then we will pray that God is merciful." Quentin insisted on staying with Hope despite Mrs. Chen's protests about propriety. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, and talked to her constantly, reminding her of her strength. "You are a fighter, Hope. Remember that first night when I told you that. You proved me right then, and you will prove me right now. Fight for our baby. Fight for us. I need you. We both need you." Hope, drenched in sweat and exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced, looked into his eyes and found strength she did not know she still had. She had fought off pneumonia when everyone said she would die. She would fight through this too. Dr. Hayes worked with skill and determination, managing to turn the baby. The pain was excruciating and Hope screamed, but she did not give up. She bore down when the doctor told her to, pushed with every ounce of strength she had left, and finally, as the sun was setting outside their window, their baby was born. The cry that filled the room was the most beautiful sound Quentin had ever heard. Dr. Hayes held up the baby, red-faced and squalling, and announced, "You have a son. A son." Quentin looked at Hope, who was crying and laughing at the same time, and felt his own tears spill over. They had a son. Dr. Hayes cleaned the baby and handed him to Hope, who cradled him against her chest with shaking arms. The baby quieted immediately, seeming to recognize his mother's heartbeat. He was perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn gray like his father's. His little fingers wrapped around Hope's thumb, and she fell completely in love. Quentin sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Hope's shoulders, looking down at their son with wonder. "What should we name him?" Hope looked up at her husband, at the man who had saved her life and given her a future. "I want to name him after you, Quentin Kane, Jr. Are you sure?" "I am sure. He is part of both of us, but he would not be here if you had not fought for me first. It is fitting." They called him Quinn for short, and he became the center of their universe. The first few weeks were exhausting as they adjusted to parenthood, but they did it together, supporting each other through the sleepless nights and the learning curve. Hope recovered well from the difficult birth, regaining her strength more quickly than Dr. Hayes had expected. Quentin joked that she recovered fast because she was too stubborn to stay down, and Hope had to agree he might be right. As Quinn grew from a baby to a toddler, Hope and Quentin's love deepened even further. They had been through so much together: illness, recovery, courtship, marriage, and now parenthood. Every challenge had brought them closer, and they faced each new day as a team. When Quinn was 2 years old, Hope discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because her body was stronger now. In the spring of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor Grace, after both their mothers. The birth was shorter and less complicated than Quinn's had been, and Quentin held his daughter with tears streaming down his face, marveling at how tiny and perfect she was. 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Thomas after Quentin's father. And 2 years after that, a second daughter, Catherine, Rose. Their house was full of noise and laughter and chaos, and Hope could not imagine being happier. She eventually did return to teaching, taking a part-time position at the school when her youngest started walking. Quentin had expanded the ranch over the years, hiring more hands and buying more land, and they were prosperous enough to afford help with the children. A young woman named Sarah from town came several days a week to help watch the little ones while Hope was at school, and Mrs. Chen, now quite elderly, still came by to oversee things and dote on the children. The years passed in a happy blur of family dinners and school programs and ranch work and Sunday church services. Hope and Quentin grew older together, their hair starting to show threads of gray, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and sun. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by all they had shared. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1898, Quentin took Hope back to the fence line where he had first kissed her and later proposed. Their children were grown now, or nearly so. Quinn was 18 and working the ranch alongside his father, already showing signs of the man he would become. Eleanor was 16 and courting a nice young man from town. Thomas was 14 and focused on his studies, talking about maybe becoming a lawyer. Catherine was 12 and absolutely horse crazy, spending every spare moment in the barn with the animals. 20 years, Hope said, leaning against the fence and looking out over the familiar landscape. Can you believe it? Best 20 years of my life, Quentin said, putting his arm around her waist and pulling her close. Though I have to admit, that first night was pretty terrifying. Which first night? Our wedding night? No, the first night I brought you home, when your fever was so high and I thought you might die before morning. I sat beside your bed and I remember thinking that it was not fair. You were so young and you had already been through so much. It was not fair that you might die alone with no one who even knew your name to mourn you. But I did not die. No, you did not. You fought. You are a fighter, Hope. I told you that then, and it is still true now. You fought to live, and then you fought to build a life. You fought to make this ranch a home, to raise our children, to follow your dreams of teaching. You have never stopped fighting for what matters. Hope turned to face him, putting her arms around his neck. We fought together. That is what made the difference. When I woke up in that bedroom and saw you sitting there, saw how much you cared about a stranger, it gave me something to fight for. It gave me hope. Is that why your mother named you Hope? Maybe. Or maybe she just knew I would need it. Hope to survive, hope to find you, hope to build this life. She kissed him softly. Thank you, Quentin, for everything. For saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life beyond anything I dreamed possible. Thank you for saying yes, for choosing to stay, for loving me back. He rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Hope Kane. I love you, Quentin Kane. They stood there as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the land they had built a life on. In the distance, they could hear their children's voices calling them back to the house for the anniversary dinner Mrs. Chen had insisted on preparing. But for just a moment more they stayed there, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for each other and built something beautiful together. The doctor had said she was too weak, but the cowboy had nursed her back and told her she was a fighter. And together, they had proved that love and determination could overcome anything. Together, they had built not just a life but a legacy, and it would continue long after they were gone, in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that would stay in the family for generations, in the love that would never die. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Hope thought about that desperate woman who had arrived in San Jose 20 years ago, sick and alone and afraid. She had been broken then, shattered by loss and illness and despair. But Quentin had seen past all of that to the strength underneath. He had believed in her when she could not believe in herself, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible. A reason to fight, a reason to live, a reason to hope. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. Quinn eventually married a lovely woman named Martha from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Hope and Quentin their first grandchildren, twin boys who were as wild and energetic as their father had been. Eleanor married her sweetheart and moved into town, where her husband ran a successful mercantile. She had 3 daughters in quick succession, all of them inheriting her grace and kindness. Thomas did become a lawyer, studying in San Francisco and eventually opening a practice in San Jose. He married a fellow student, a brilliant woman named Alice, who was one of the first female lawyers in California. They had 2 sons and a daughter who were all encouraged to pursue education and careers, regardless of gender. Catherine never married, instead choosing to run her own horse breeding operation on a piece of land Quentin and Hope gave her. She was happy and successful, proving that a woman could make her own way in the world without a husband. Hope continued teaching until she was 60 years old, touching the lives of countless children over the decades. Many of her former students came back to visit her over the years, telling her how much she had influenced their lives, how she had encouraged them to dream bigger and work harder. It filled her heart with joy to know she had made a difference. Quentin ran the ranch until he was 65, finally turning over full control to Quinn, though he still spent time out with the cattle and horses because he could not imagine a life completely away from the land he loved. He and Quinn worked together seamlessly, and it pleased Quentin to see his son carrying on the legacy he had built. On quiet evenings, Hope and Quentin would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over their land, surrounded by the family they had created. Sometimes all their children and grandchildren would gather for Sunday dinners, and the house would be full of noise and laughter and love. Those were the times when Hope felt most grateful for the life she had been given, for the second chance she had been granted when she was at her lowest point. Dr. Hayes, long retired, would sometimes join them for these family gatherings. He was in his 80s now, but his mind was sharp, and he loved to tell stories about the old days. His favorite story was always about the night he had told Quentin that Hope was too weak to survive, and how Quentin had refused to accept that diagnosis. "I thought I knew everything about medicine," Dr. Hayes would say, shaking his head with a smile. "But I learned that night that there are things more powerful than medicine. Hope had love, and that made all the difference. Love and someone who believed in her." As Hope and Quentin entered their 70s, their pace slowed, but their love never did. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed each other good morning and good night. They still told each other, "I love you," every single day. They had built a life based on a foundation of mutual respect, deep affection, and unwavering commitment, and it had carried them through every storm. On a warm evening in June of 1918, 40 years after Hope had first arrived in San Jose, she and Quentin sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. Hope was 75 now, Quentin 76. They were both in good health for their age, though they moved more slowly and tired more easily. Their children were grown with children of their own. Some of their grandchildren now had children, making Hope and Quentin great-grandparents. "You ever think about that first night?" Hope asked, her hand in Quentin's as it had been for 40 years. "Which first night?" "You know which one." "The night you brought me here. The night you saved my life." "I think about it sometimes," Quentin admitted. "I remember being so afraid you would not make it. I remember feeling helpless, like there was nothing I could do except sit there and watch you slip away. But I did not slip away." "No, you did not. You grabbed hold of life with both hands and refused to let go. Because of you. Because you gave me something to hold on to." Quentin squeezed her hand gently. "We saved each other, Hope. I was just going through the motions before you came. The ranch was successful, but I was lonely. I did not realize how lonely until I had you to share it all with. We were both lost, and we found each other." "Yes." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, the same gesture he had made so many times over the years. "And I would do it all again. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you again and again. As I would choose you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Behind them, in the house they had filled with love and laughter, they could hear sounds of their great-grandson playing, visiting with his parents. Life continued, generation after generation, all because two people had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Hope leaned her head on Quentin's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. She thought about the desperate, dying woman she had been, and the strong, loved woman she had become. The journey between those two versions of herself had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been worth every step. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing the fighter in me when I could not see it myself. For refusing to give up on me. For loving me. Thank you for fighting. For staying. For building this life with me." They sat there under the stars, two people who had loved each other well for 40 years, who had created a family and a legacy, who had proved that sometimes the greatest love stories start in the darkest moments. The doctor had been wrong all those years ago. Hope had not been too weak. She had been exactly strong enough, especially with someone beside her who believed in her strength. And so their story, which had begun with illness and despair, had transformed into one of love and hope and family. It was a story they would tell their great-grandchildren, a story that would be passed down through generations, a story that proved the power of compassion and love, and refusing to give up on someone when they needed help most. The night grew darker, and eventually they went inside, Quentin's arm around Hope's waist, supporting her as he always had. They went upstairs to the bedroom where Hope had first woken so many years ago, where they had shared countless nights and mornings, where they had loved and laughed, and sometimes cried together. They climbed into bed and Quentin pulled Hope close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had for 4 decades. "Good night, my love," he whispered into her hair. "Good night," she whispered back. "I love you. I love you too." Always. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their home in each other. And when morning came, they woke together as they had every morning for 40 years, grateful for another day, another chance to love each other, another chapter in their beautiful story. The years that followed brought more joy and some sorrow, as is the nature of a long life. Hope and Quentin lost friends, including Dr. Hayes, who passed peacefully in his sleep at age 87. They attended weddings of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. They weathered the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, thankfully without losing any immediate family members. They saw the world change around them, saw automobiles replace horses, saw airplanes take to the skies, saw women gain the right to vote in 1920, which Hope celebrated with quiet satisfaction. Through it all, they remained each other's constant. When Hope's health began to decline in her late 70s, Quentin cared for her with the same devotion he had shown that first night. When Quentin developed arthritis that made ranch work painful, Hope was there to massage his aching joints and remind him to rest. They had promised to love each other in sickness and in health, and they kept that promise faithfully. On a spring morning in 1925, Hope woke feeling unusually tired. She was 82 years old and Quentin was 83. They had been married for 47 years, together for almost 48. She lay in bed, listening to Quentin moving around downstairs, probably making coffee as he did every morning. She smiled, thinking about all the mornings they had shared, all the quiet moments and extraordinary ones. When Quentin came back upstairs with coffee for both of them, he found Hope sitting up in bed, looking out the window at the sunrise. "Beautiful morning," he said, handing her a cup. "Yes, it is." She took the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Quentin, I want to tell you something." Something in her tone made him sit down beside her on the bed. "What is it?" "I want to thank you for these years, for this life. I know I have said it before, but I want to say it again. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose, love. You gave me a reason to live when I had given up on life. Hope, you are worrying me. Are you feeling all right?" "I am fine. I just want to make sure you know how much you mean to me, how grateful I am for every day we have had together." He set his own coffee aside and took her hand. "I know, and I hope you know the same. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hope Kane." She smiled at him, at his weathered face and gray hair and eyes that still looked at her with the same love they had held 48 years ago. "I know." They sat together, drinking their coffee and watching the sunrise, holding hands as they had done thousands of times before. It was an ordinary moment, the kind they had shared throughout their marriage, but it was also extraordinary because it was theirs. Hope and Quentin were blessed with several more years together. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1928, with a huge party attended by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. There were over 50 people gathered at the ranch that day. All of them descended from or connected to Hope and Quentin, all of them evidence of the love story that had started so improbably in 1878. They cut a cake together, their aged hands both on the knife, and everyone cheered. Later, they danced together slowly, Quentin's arms around Hope, moving to music only they could hear. 50 years, Hope said, looking up at him. "Can you believe it?" "Every single one a blessing," Quentin replied. "Though I have to admit, I am glad the first year is far behind us. Those early days when you were so sick, I was terrified I would lose you before we even had a chance. But you did not lose me. You held on and I held on, and here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, kissing her forehead tenderly. Quentin passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1931 at the age of 89. He had lived a long, full life, and he died with Hope beside him, holding his hand just as he had held hers through so many trials. Hope was devastated by the loss, feeling as if part of her soul had been ripped away, but she took comfort in knowing they had loved each other well, had lived a beautiful life together and would be together again someday. She continued living at the ranch, surrounded by family who checked on her daily. Quinn had taken over the ranch completely years ago, but Hope still felt connected to the land and the house she had shared with Quentin. Every evening, she would sit on the porch, looking out at the sunset, feeling Quentin's presence beside her even though he was gone. Hope lived for 3 more years, seeing her youngest great-grandchild born and holding the baby with tears of joy streaming down her face. She continued to tell stories about Quentin, about their love, about how he had saved her life, and she had saved his in return. She wanted their descendants to know where they came from, to understand the foundation of love and faith and determination that their family was built on. On a warm spring evening in 1934, Hope passed away peacefully, surrounded by family at the age of 91. Her last words were, "I am coming, Quentin. Wait for me." They buried her beside Quentin on a hill overlooking the ranch where they could rest together forever, watching over the land and family they had built. The headstone read, Hope Olson Kane, 1843–1934, and Quentin Kane, 1842–1931. United in life, united in death, their love eternal. At the funeral, their eldest grandchild, now 62 years old, stood up to speak about his grandparents. He told the story of how they had met, how Quentin had refused to accept the doctor's pronouncement that Hope was too weak to survive, how he had nursed her back to health with devotion and faith. "My grandfather told her she was a fighter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. And she proved him right. But they were both fighters. They fought for each other and they fought for this family. Everything we have, everything we are, exists because 2 people refuse to give up on love. That is their legacy. That is what they have given us. The family gathered on the porch after the funeral, sharing stories and memories, laughing and crying together. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they all felt the presence of Hope and Quentin, their love still palpable even after death. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passing from Quinn to his son, and then to his son. Each generation heard the story of Hope and Quentin, of the cowboy who saved the dying woman and the love that grew between them. It became a family legend, a reminder that love can conquer even the darkest circumstances, that faith and determination can work miracles, that 2 broken people can heal each other and build something beautiful. The little bedroom where Hope had first woken to see Quentin sitting beside her bed was preserved as it had been, and family members would sometimes go there to feel close to their ancestors. The fence line where Quentin had first kissed Hope and later proposed became a favorite spot for family proposals, with several grandchildren and great-grandchildren choosing to ask their own loves to marry them in that significant place. The cradle Quentin had carved for their first child was passed down through the family, used by each new baby, a tangible connection to the love that had started it all. The sapphire ring Hope had worn for 53 years was given to Quinn's daughter when she got engaged, and it too was passed down through generations of Kane women, each one hearing the story of how Quentin had given it to Hope with shaking hands and a heart full of love. And so the story of Hope and Quentin lived on, not just in the memories of those who had known them, but in the very fabric of the family they created. Their great-great-great-grandchildren, living in a world Hope and Quentin could never have imagined, still heard the story and understood the power of their love. They understood that real love means fighting for someone when they are too weak to fight for themselves. They understood that love means believing in someone even when everyone else has given up. They understood that love means choosing to stay, day after day, year after year, through joy and sorrow, through health and sickness, until death and beyond. The doctor had said she was too weak. But the cowboy nursed her back and said, "You are a fighter." And together, they created a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of compassion, faith, determination, and love. It was a story that began in desperation and ended in triumph, a story that proved miracles do happen when two people refuse to give up on each other. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard times and harder choices, of survival and perseverance, and ultimately, of love conquering all. And though Hope and Quentin were gone, their love remained, eternal and unbreakable, woven into the land they had worked, the house they had filled with laughter, the family they had created, and the hearts of everyone who heard their story. They had lived, they had loved, and they had left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask of a life well lived? Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their legacy secure. From that desperate Tuesday afternoon in 1878, when a dying woman arrived in San Jose, to the peaceful spring evening in 1934, when she finally went to join the man who had saved her, Hope and Quentin had lived a beautiful love story, one that would be told and retold for generations to come, inspiring others to believe in the power of love and the strength of the human spirit.